Welcome back. It's now the end of round 7 of the Brew Bowl, which means it's time to look at a summary of how the week has gone as we move into the final round next week before the playoffs. So let's jump over to the sheet and have a look at where the teams are placed. So the Iron Hammerers have moved back into first place, pushing the Drakes down. A few other movements here and there below that, but what I'll call out here specifically is the teams that are in bold at the top. So the Hammerers, the Drakes, the Knights, and the Blight have already secured their space in the playoffs with one round still to play. So obviously placement's important because higher ranked teams will face lower ranked teams for an easier run to the grand final. And then at the bottom of the table, the teams in italics, so the Griffins, Marauders, and Raiders, have all gotten to the point now where even with a win next week, there is no path for them into the finals. So teams like the Owls, Fanatics, Guardians, for example, still do have a chance of making the finals. It's just a case of they need not only to win their match, but they also need certain teams to lose as well. So we'll talk about the matches coming up shortly as well. Let's move on to the teams. So the Ascalon Gladiators, Foehammer's team, they beat the Owls in a game I'd rather forget, thanks to my bad rolling. But it was a great effort by Foehammer being down 2 of his major players, not having his blitzer and one of his blockers. He's back to a full team for the final round. He got tackle onto one of his blockers as well. And his team has now hit that 1 million CTV mark as well. So great effort there from Foehammer. The Axolotl Coatls, which of course is Pondo the Mad's team, they beat the Griffins in another match where I didn't score at all. So picked up block finally on one of his blockers. I think that Pondo's been looking for that elusive block skill forever. Finally managed to pick it up. So he still has a full team with a good solid bench going into the final round as well. The Fungus Bay Fanatics, our Goblin team, they beat the Raiders. Once again, their Looney were rolling random secondary skills and random play has picked up his 3rd skill. He hasn't left the team yet, probably will leave. It'll be a coin flip for him to leave in the final round. They had a bit of money left over as well, so they bought an extra lineman, giving themselves a deeper bench to cover for when they lose their Looney and their Bomber to being sent off. Moving on to the Glumhoff Guardians, they were reduced for their match against the Marauders, but they did still draw with the Marauders. Decided to give a random skill to their Ogre, since we're going towards the finals now, if they do happen to make it in, which would be difficult but not impossible. So they got Guard, which is quite a good skill for the Ogre. Actually means that he can sort of stand in the middle of the field and give strength bonuses to those around him, even when he's marked. So great for them. But yeah, we'll see. They really need things to go their way to get through to the final still. The Executioners drew against the Blight. They lost their Witch Elf to the draft and also one of their linemen to miss next game. They did have the money to buy a new Witch Elf and a new lineman as well, but obviously go without the skills there. So Sidestep was a great skill on Ceres Ashai. She was moving up with a chance to get into the sort of the top 5 for higher scorers, but of course now she is out and Willow Rathmore is in instead. And they still have Guinevere Denom, which is their other Witch Elf as well. So we did the switch partway through the season from 2 Blitzers, 1 Witch Elf to 2 Witch Elves, 1 Blitzer. The Icehorn Peak Jarls lost their match against the Gladiators in another game. In the game I'd rather forget I mentioned earlier. They also lost one of their Ulfanar to the draft. So I took the opportunity, since they had a bit of money left over, to bring a Yeti back into the team. So they've gone without Yeti all season long, and they will have a Yeti in the final match, even though they won't be able to go into the playoffs now. The Hammerers, doing very well, got back to the top of the league with a win over the Outcasts, picked up block on Bo Jackson, and still plenty of funds there. No issue with expensive mistakes, since this particular player, being Big Spoon, has a playbook ability which lets him avoid expensive mistakes, so he can sort of save the money for when he needs it. Okay, the Kislev Outcasts, who just lost the Hammers, as mentioned. One of their linemen, Zeta Rivers, missing next game, but they did pick up Guard on Jen Barebane, that player's 2nd skill. So, yep, good effort from Lawson there. We'll see how he does in the final round. The Leichberg Knights, who have finally slain the dragon with being the 2nd team to actually beat the Drakes, managed to get a solid win too, a 3-1 win, I believe. So picked up an extra lineman who got pro after Mildred Campion was killed, I believe, by one of our own team members, and also picked up Fenn on one of their linemen as well. Lauren Forrest Drakes, as mentioned, lost to the Knights. Also had both of their War Dancers drafted away in a horrible turn of luck. Did pick up Sneaky Git on an alignment and had enough money to buy 1 War Dancer, but not 2. The Norsca Marauders, in their draw with the Guardians, also lost 2 of their players, 2 of their skilled Beastman linemen to the draft. Managed to replace 1 of them and also picked up Disturbing Presence on their other lineman, but they'll be going into the final round needing to pick up a Journeyman. The Sprayvold Butchers drew with the Enslavers. They lost 1 of their Marauders to the draft. They lost their Corngore, their real ball carrier, to an injury for the next game. Picked up Thick Skull, not that great on a Bloodseeker, but look, I suppose it keeps them on the field at least, but it probably wasn't the best game for the Butchers at the end of the day. The Slow Thicket Pantry Raiders, they lost their game against the Fanatics. Their catcher is missing the next game. They were able to buy a second treatment in for the final round, but they're already out really, so it doesn't matter what happens there, but they can still cause problems for another team. Some City Blight, being the Amethyst team, they drew with the Executioners. He was going for leader on his throw and managed to get that. And so, yeah, he's well set now going into that final round. Talabectan Griffins lost to the Coatls. They had their long-time blitzer Archibald Hecker drafted away. They did pick up strip ball on a lineman. They decided to save their money. They couldn't afford to buy any sort of positional player other than another thrower, which they didn't need. So they'll see how they go. If they won't make it through to the finals, but they'll save the money for redraft for the next season. The Warpstone Enslavers, AP's team. Unfortunately, the Gravemaker annoyed the sponsor and will be missing next game, not due to injury, but due to the sponsorship rules. He did pick up claws on Bulk Hogan, but it will be rough for him going into the final round with the Gravemaker out, but also with such a huge current team value of 1,060. We might see, after he plays his Nemesis match, we might see some changes in his team roster as well. All right, looking at the individual players, Oswald Clapel took first place on the conversions or on the passes chart, pushing Dade down after Dade missed a game due to injury. Flatball Brady also moved up into equal 5th place, which he shares with Linkor, Embouchard, and Ripley. On the scoring, Sonia Vonhoff jumped up into equal third place in touchdowns, which pushed Sarah Vardottir, who was drafted away at the start of the season, off the list. So she will not be appearing there again, but Sonia is now well and truly entrenched there. The Gravemaker remains the only one with an interception, albeit a deflection, and he also moved up a rank in the most deadly, pushing down Fazieth to 3rd place, while he sits comfortably in 2nd. Most valuable players, Visera still sits at the top. Not much change here. Snozzaloon moved up to top 5 MVPs because he keeps hogging the skills, and no changes to the most expensive player. All right, let's look at the final round. The Hammers will be playing the Knights. On tour play, the rating here for the Hammers is 11.9. The Knights is 9.2. This is really a case of a really powerful first season team with re-rolls, with lots of good skills, with a great player going up against a fresh to this season team, albeit with a re-roll, thanks to how Mike chose to buy it up. But, has slogged his way to the top of or near the top of the ladder throughout this season. I think that realistically speaking, Spoon has a very good chance in this match, and the numbers do show that. Although Mike has been able to pull some incredible wins out here and there, both against me and against other players too. So I don't want to write Mike off, but I think that the Hammerers have a solid advantage, but both teams are already confirmed into the playoffs regardless. So really it's playing for honour. The Drakes versus Executioners will be an NPC versus NPC match. Elves versus Elves. 8.4 is the rating on the Drakes, 8.2 on the Executioners. Very close. Obviously, the Drakes are down to only a single War Dancer now. The Executioners still have both Witch Elves, albeit one of them being new. So I think that, they can go anyway. It just depends on how the rolls go. Do the Executioners get good armor breaks? Do the Drakes get good breakaway runs? We'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. The Blight versus the Gladiators. So this will be Dynamis versus Foehammer. The Blight have a rating of 9.2. Gladiators 8.6. Pretty close. I think that Foehammer really wanted to face the Underworld team to see how he does against them. The Blight are already through to the finals regardless of the outcome, but Foreman needs to win this one to guarantee his spot. He could still get through with a loss. He just relies on other teams then to also take losses. So we'll see whether Dynamis rolls over for him or decides to really make him work for that position. And we've got the Coattles versus the Outcasts, so Pondo the Mad versus Lawson. The Coattles are on a rating of 7.2, Outcasts on a rating of 9. A big part of that is the fact that the Coattles have 0 rating in the dirty play field, since Mo Jadden does not foul. With that being said, the final match is a no referee match, so will the Coattles foul around and find out? We'll have to wait and see. Okay, the other half of round 8, the Enslavers taking on the Marauders. So this will be AP versus Omar Krieg. So the Enslavers here with a rating of 9.2, the Marauders with a rating of 8.5. We've got Rat Ogre versus Troll in the big guy field. Oh no, Rat Ogre, because obviously the Gravemaker is out. I think even with the Gravemaker out, AP just has a lot of options when it comes to speed. He hasn't got the strength, because at the end of the day, Omar's team members either have 4 strength or 4 strength on the blitz. But I think that AP's speed will be an advantage here. So I think the numbers of 9.2 versus 8.5 probably reflect how that could go. Of course, AP needs to win that match to really get through to the playoffs. For Omar Krieg, it won't make a difference, but I think AP is going to be really hoping for a solid win there to keep his playoff dreams alive. The Guardians versus the Butchers, really quite a one-sided match with the Guardians sitting on 7.7 and the Butchers on 10.7. Both teams need a win for a chance to go through it. Even then, that only puts them towards the bottom half of the top 8. So we'll have to see how they go. I think the Butchers probably have the strength in them to defeat the Guardians, although they don't have their regular ball carrier, so they've got no one better than a 4+ agility, which could make handling the ball difficult. But we'll see. Maybe the Butchers can pull something out against the Guardians, or maybe the Guardians will surprise us. Then we've got the Raiders versus the Jarls. The Raiders on 7.6 and the Jarls on a rating of 8.9. The Raiders have got both treatment. The Jarls did bring a Yeti in, but I think that the Raiders, I don't know, maybe I did really well with the Halfling team early in the first season, but maybe, the novelty's worn off now and I just can't play them properly again. But the Raiders seem to be a team which does poorly, and I think probably will do poorly again in this final round. Neither of these teams can make it through, so they are just playing for honor of how they do. And then finally, we've got the Griffins versus Fanatics. The Griffins on 8.8, Fanatics on 8.6. I think it's a pretty evenly placed match. It just really depends on whether or not the ball turns around fast, like we have multiple drives, because that will then see the Fanatics special weapons player Snoz the Loon and Ruck the Mad Bomber eliminated if they are then sent off. So that could make a big difference. If they spend a lot of time on the field, they could really do some damage and potentially stop the Griffins from running away with the score. So that is the round 7 summary. Round 8 will be starting soon. I have to coordinate a couple more Nemesis games first. And if you didn't notice, by the way, it will be 4 player versus player games and 4 NPC versus NPC games in that final round before we move to the playoffs, which will happen probably over the next 3 weeks. I'll do some Nemesis games. We've got one player who's off on vacation, but we'll get the rest played and we'll get them updated to a player onto YouTube shortly. So stand by, there is still more to come. We are nearly done with the pre-season before we move to the playoffs. So it's only going to get more exciting. Stay tuned and keep enjoying the show. We'll see you next time.